Well, good afternoon and welcome to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. This is our weekly call-in town hall and radio show, and we have a lot of exciting news to share with you today. It has been quite the day in the world of politics and Virginia politics here. I'm State Senator Amanda Chase, your weekly radio show host, serving the 11th Senatorial District, which includes all of Amelia, all of Colonial Heights, and most of Chesterfield. I'm a Christian conservative Republican, and in that order, I serve on 4 committees: health and education, transportation, local governments, privileges and elections, and I co-founded the Transparency Caucus. And many of the topics that we address on our show each week are actually issues that constituents have brought to my attention. In fact, that's where we get many of the great bills that we come up with for this session, which is starting next Wednesday. So this is the show right before session, and I'm going to do my best to continue Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase so that you know for the next 60-day session that we have. You know, Congress at the federal level, they meet year-round. We meet at the state level, the state legislature and the General Assembly. This year, we'll meet from January until March. We have 60 days that we work. And, last session, I had Martha Bonetta, who did a great job hosting the show. We're going to try to continue on Thursdays, but I've got committee meetings, so we may have to switch the date to Fridays right after the Lee Brothers show, but we'll just have to play that by ear. But I'm determined to try to keep it going myself this coming session so I can give you a live, up-to-date week by week analysis of kind of what's going on in the General Assembly each week. I do this show because I feel like it's important to stay connected to the people that I serve. I'm not paid to do this show. I've been doing this show for over a year as a weekly town hall, and you're welcome to call in. I know many of you have, and I greatly appreciate that. I'm working on trying to change the culture of our government, returning it back to the people. And I ran on term limiting career politicians and returning the government back to people. So my goal, honestly, is to be a representative who's transparent, accessible, and approachable. And, since being elected in 2015, I have pushed for greater transparency in government, legislation that returns the power back to the people, helping restore reciprocity of gun rights, amongst other things. I mean, we've had a number of things, holding Dominion accountable regarding coal ash cleanup, which will be a bill that comes before us this year. So anyway, we have a lot of exciting things to talk about. So let me tell you about today. Very excited that Senate Majority Leader, Republican Majority Leader Tommy Norment is going to be joining us in the show. And he is the current Republican Majority Leader of the Senate of Virginia. I work very well with him and appreciate his service. He's actually served in the Virginia General Assembly since 1992 and represents the 3rd Senatorial District of the Virginia Senate. That's going to include the Virginia Peninsula, the King and Queen County, King William County, New Kent, Gloucester County, and Middle Peninsula. Professionally, Senator Norment is an attorney. He is also a professor at the College of William and Mary. Interestingly enough, he graduated from VMI and law school at the College of William and Mary. And in 1987, he was elected to the James City County Board of Supervisors and served as chairman of the board. So it's great that before serving in the Senate, he has that local perspective from being on the board. Probably understands the importance of not sending unfunded mandates down to our localities, and I'm sure his Board of Supervisors appreciates that. Senator Norment currently serves on Senate Commerce and Labor, Courts of Justice and Rules Committees. He's the co-chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, and he's also chairman of the Senate Finance Committees on Education, Capital Outlay, and the Commerce and Labor Subcommittee on Utilities. He's a member of a number of commissions, like probably 12. I'm not going to list all those here. I'm going to bring out the top 2 that we'll kind of talk about a little bit today: Virginia State Crime Commission, the Virginia Conflict of Interest and Ethics Advisory Council. And he's a longtime resident of James City County. And I think he is on the line now. Senator Norment, how are you? Happy New Year.
Amanda, Happy New Year to you, and I hope that you are not enjoying the snow that I am.
You probably got more than we did here in Richmond. I still probably have at least 2 inches. When I was driving into the studio was the first time I ventured out, and I was very impressed with VDOT. And I would like to let everybody know that the state is responsible for the interstates, not the residential and the back roads. So you'll have to call your board of supervisors on those. But the state is doing its job, and I'm very proud of them, especially on my ride to the station today.
Well, I have not been out at all, but I understand that this is one of those occasions where VDOT does deserve to be complimented, that they've done a pretty good job on both the interstates and also on the major thoroughfares. But I must confess, on a good day, I'm a bad driver, so I figured I would just stay in today.
Yeah, I normally am one of those too. I'm the one that everybody warns you about, and I do try to stay home as well. But today, we have so much good news today. All eyes were on the Virginia House of Delegates this morning at 11 o'clock. Were you able to live stream the State Board of Elections drawing this morning?
I did not live stream it, but I had someone there who was keeping me updated, and how I enjoyed learning about the history of that bowl, as all of Virginia and most of the major networks were on the edge of their chairs waiting for the drawing of the name. But we got to learn about that bowl that they were drawing out of.
I just thought that, I have to be honest. My first thought when I saw the bowl was, why is it not clear? Why is the bowl solid? Because, I try not to be a conspiracy theorist, but, I always think worst case scenario here, but whenever it's interesting. A lot of people don't realize this, but the three people that were there, at the top, the vice chairwoman, Claire Bell Wheeler, and we had one Republican and two Democrats, because some people were saying, oh, this was rigged. I'm looking at some of the comments out there, and I was like, no, it was actually a Democratic representative that picked the Republican out of the bowl.
I like the irony of that. Yeah, it's good that you remind your listeners that for many, many years in Virginia, whichever party has the governor's mansion is entitled to two of the three positions on the State Board of Elections. So that's not any conspiracy that came about under this administration. But I did find it ironic and satisfying that a Democrat was so generous to pull out the deserved name that would give the Republicans the majority in the House of Delegates. So that was a good thing. And David Yancey is a good and close personal friend of mine, and has been for many, many years. I've known his family down in Newport News ever since I first started practicing law. And David is a very fine person, and I have commended him on the way that he has handled this. He really has not been as strident or in the media whining about the results or protesting about the results. And he's conducted himself just as the gentleman that he is. So that excitement is over. I don't know what the newspapers and the talking heads will find to talk about tomorrow, but I'm sure they'll find something.
Well, I can tell you my guess, and what I'm seeing in social media is they're already saying, Republicans just at this point, we just can't even believe that we won this, because we're so used to losing lately that we're like, did we really win this? Like, oh my gracious. We actually won this. So now let's just talk about what this means and why this drawing is so important. A lot of things are determined by, a lot of people who may not be even aware that this drawing is going on. I have a number of people that tune in that are not political. They could care less about politics. They're like, well, what exactly? I was talking. I'm gonna. One of my good friends said, so what exactly is this thing going on Thursday? And I was like, well, it just pretty much determines the fate of the General Assembly's House right now. It's pretty important. So first of all, we keep the majority at this point. And I know some people have said, well, is there going to be a recount? But we've already had a recount. So by law, they're not allowed to have another recount. And now I'm asking the law professor here now to comment on that one. And it looks like we hopefully have like a few minutes. We're at 30 seconds. We're going to have to go to the break already. I do not want to cut you off, let me tell you. So what we'll do is when we come back for the break, would you mind sharing with us your thoughts on this possible recounts?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Amanda. I really would.
That would be great, because I know people are curious. That's one of the things I saw. So y'all stay tuned with the Senate Republican Majority Leader, Tommy Norment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Cut to the Chase with State Senator Amanda Chase and Republican Majority Leader of the Senate of Virginia, Tommy Norment. Are you there, Senator Norment?
Before we get on about the outcome of today, I missed an opportunity. You were talking about you thought that there would be a clear or transparent bowl, and I thought that was quite typical of the attitude you have about open government. I think all of your listeners need to be reminded that you have been the most ardent advocate for transparency in state government. You've been a tireless advocate of trying to give the general public an opportunity to know better about what's going on. And so I could understand why you would expect it to be a transparent bowl.
Well, thank you for that. And I have to give kudos to you for actually signing the letter that the Transparency Caucus put together to send to the clerk, so that for the first time in Virginia's history, our listeners will be able to live stream our committee meetings. It's the first time in Virginia's history. And I know that would have never happened had you not signed that letter. So thank you.
Well, it would never happened if you had, and the Transparency Caucus with your leadership had not been advocating it so strongly. And so now the citizens can go to the website for virginiageneralassembly.gov and get live streaming. So you are to be congratulated on that.
Well, thank you. Well, we are all ears today. So many questions have been surrounding this. We're talking about the 94th House District, which is the Newport News area. For those of you who are not political, it's 94th is Newport News area. We're talking about the race between incumbent Republican David Yancey and Democratic challenger Shelley Simons today. And basically, Delegate David Yancey's name was chosen, and the Republicans are all excited. We're excited. It's been a great day for us. We were doing the happy dance earlier. And so let's talk about what this means for Virginia.
Well, I think it means an awful lot. First of all, we are just a few days from the convening of the 2018 session of the General Assembly that starts on Wednesday, January the 10th. There has certainly been a cloud of uncertainty that's been hanging over the House of Delegates since November. And I think this certainty is going to now allow the House to move forward and to reorganize itself as it does after each general election. So they'll be able to go ahead and elect their speaker, make the appointments to the various committees, select the various chairmen, and we will be able to start business, hopefully, beginning very actively on January the 10th. From our Senate's perspective, I had absolutely no doubt that regardless of what was going on in the House, that Amanda and myself and our 38 colleagues were going to move forward with business as usual. We were going to move our legislation forward and wait for whatever the outcome is over in the House of Delegates. But I would say that there may be some uncertainty still casting the shadow over the House of Delegates and what happened today. Virginia law is written very peculiarly, and actually it does make a reference to allowing the loser of the draw to request another recount, and that's somewhat of an absurdity. I have been talking with the Yancey campaign, and I know all of those ballots have been run through for a second count, but the law is written in an unusual fashion. I had hoped that the Democratic candidate would be graceful and ladylike and say enough is enough, but I did read online earlier today that she made it emphatically clear that she is not prepared to concede that she lost that seat. And more importantly, she further indicated that all issues pertaining to recounts and future lawsuits remain open. I don't know, Amanda, whether that was just an emotional reaction from her or whether or not it represents a concerted and deliberate House Democratic strategy that they're going to continue to go to whatever ends they may in order to try to seize control of the House. Two things that come to my mind real quickly, and you read a lot about it, but one is that it is a vivid reminder that everyone should vote because one vote literally can make a difference. One vote has been holding the balance of the majority in the House of Delegates in Virginia in abeyance for weeks on it. So that's one very important point. And I think a second point from my perspective is it is unfortunate when the courts have to get involved and possibly determine the outcome of elections. That's what we want the citizens to do, but we want everybody to play by the rules and not get involved in convoluted legal cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually watched the proceedings online today, the State Board of Elections proceedings, and in that, Shelley Edmonds did say she was not conceding. She said she was, quote unquote, reflecting. Obviously not very happy with today's results. Now, according to Virginia Code 24.2, it says any person who loses the determination by lot may petition for a recount pursuant to Article 1 of Chapter 8. Does that, and then subsection D goes on to say there shall be only one redetermination of the vote in each precinct. Does that subsection mean that they only get one recount, or is this considered something different?
Amanda, very candidly, I don't think that has been interpreted in Virginia. We really haven't had a situation like this. The last time we had an evenly divided House in 1998, I remember it very vividly, and they did not get involved in that many lawsuits and were able, the Democrats were able to force through their reorganization. What I do know is that Delegate David Yancey's legal team is prepared to argue that very point that you just brought up. They are going to argue 2 points. First of all, I think the statute of law you're referring to, it says that they may petition for a recount. That does not mean that it has to be granted. So even if the request is made, there is a discretion to say there has already been one recount. The courts have already looked at this very thoroughly, and not once but twice have made the determination that ballot that changed the outcome is going to be counted. So I think it's very important to understand that they can petition, that it is not guaranteed, and David Yancey's attorneys are going to be prepared to argue there's been one recount and there's no sense going through a second one when there has already been one. So I'm not very good at predicting what the weather is going to be. I thought it was going to be 78 and sunny today, but I'm even worse at predicting what courts and election officials are going to do.
Well, don't go away, because we want to have you back on. We want to stay on the line. We'll be right back after the break with Senator Norment. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. State Senator Amanda Chase with my very special guest today, Republican Majority Leader of the Senate of Virginia, Tommy Norment. You know, we had to ask for a snowstorm to get him snowed into his house because he's so busy between being a professor at William and Mary and all his other responsibilities. I'm so thankful for this snowstorm because we hopefully get you this whole hour. I'm selfish. But,
Amanda, I promise it won't take a snowstorm.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and just appreciate your experience and expertise on this. The next thing I thought we would talk about is just kind of giving people an overview of the upcoming session, which starts, believe it or not, people, this Wednesday. We've been talking about this for a year now. So let's talk about top issues. Number one issue is going to be the budget. Tell us what you see in the forecast for the budget.
Amanda, thank you for that entry on the subject. We are going to probably be dealing with over 3,000 individual pieces of legislation during the session, and perhaps 40 to 50% of those pieces of legislation will pass. But none is more important than the budget. The reason I say that is you hear lots of conversations about delegates and senators who are introducing legislation, and it is important legislation. But the most important piece of legislation is the budget. And the reason for that is where you put your money is the most clear articulation of where your priorities are as it relates to the policies and services that Virginians deserve. Governor McAuliffe laid out his version of the budget. I will say I thought he was very ambitious and creative, and certainly has increased the projected spending in his budget dramatically. I talked with Delegate Chris Jones, who chairs the House Appropriations Committee. He and I believe that perhaps the governor was a little ambitious in the amount of money that he wanted to spend. But of course, that's easy for him to do as he's heading down 95, looking at Richmond in the rearview mirror and looking at Washington, D.C. through the front windshield. Mm-hmm. The 140 of us in the General Assembly are going to have to deal with that budget.
And he included Medicaid. He included Medicaid too in his budget.
Yes, he did. But that should come as no surprise to even to fiscal conservatives like ourselves. He has done that every year since he's been elected governor. He has been very determined and persistent in the proposed expansion of Medicaid. And he just has not been willing to take a no answer from the General Assembly on that. That's just one of a lot of items. This year, we are required by law to do what we call re-benchmarking in education. And you do a lot in education, Amanda, so you know that this is something we must do. We have to true up the actual cost of education. That is primarily a local government issue, but we put substantial state dollars in there, including all of the lottery proceeds or dedicated to public education. So that is a very, very significant issue that we have to deal with. I do think that there's going to have to be additional money put in areas of health and human resources. You follow politics very carefully, I know, Amanda, and one of the things that we both noticed from the exit polls from last November's elections, that the number one issue in the minds of Virginians were not monuments, not economic development, not public education, but health care. About 40% of those in the exit polls said health care was the number one concern. And our listeners should not be confused. These exit polls were not talking about Medicaid expansion. what they were talking about is the astronomical cost of health care. Even if you go on to the exchange under Obamacare, it is ridiculous what the premiums and the deductibles are. And then we've had several providers that have either dropped out of the market or have restricted where they're offering health insurance in the market. So when we take that in consideration, along with mental health issues, Senator Creed Deeds has been working very hard with the Commission on mental health.
Senator Norman, I hate to cut you off. We've got to go to a break, but can we finish that thought when you come back from the break?
We can finish whatever you want.
That sounds great. Y'all don't go away. We're going to talk all about health care when we get back from the break. Well, I really like that music because it's very celebratory, and I'm feeling very celebratory today after today's great news in the Commonwealth with this win here. And I have my good friend and colleague and leader, Senate Majority Leader of Virginia, the Tommy Norment, here on the line, telling us exactly what we can expect from this session as the leader. And before we had to go, and I apologize for having to go there. We sometimes have hard breaks that I just can't get rid of. But so we were talking about the astronomical cost of health care and how 40% of Virginians that were voting in in the exit polls were saying that health care is their number one issue. Let's talk about addressing that this session.
Well, Amanda, obviously the state of Virginia is not going to be able to absorb all of the costs on health care, and much as we would like to be able to affordably extend health care benefits to every Virginian, we're just not going to be able to do that. So I think what we're going to have to do is focus on those that are the most vulnerable. And that's why I mentioned earlier about the mental health issues that we have. The cost of mental health is just staggering to Virginians. I was in a meeting earlier this week with one of the sheriffs who has, I think, the largest jail in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it was unbelievable to hear how many mental health patients that he has in his jail because there is nowhere else to put them right now. And there's two tragedies about that. One is the exorbitant cost of keeping these individuals in a jail, but more importantly, that the opportunity to get the mental health treatment that they really need to make them a functional citizen in our community is not immediately available in the jail. They try to address it, but they have certain limitations on it. And if, in fact, there were places to put these individuals where they could receive treatment, there's a much better opportunity at them recovering and being rehabilitated. So that's just one little tiny wedge of it. Obviously, there's a lot of stress out in rural Virginia for the delivery of health care. We've done some things in Virginia to try to incentivize doctors through scholarships to go out into rural Virginia, but there is a lack of affordable and immediate health care in many parts of Virginia. Southwest Virginia certainly could use more delivery of health care. So that's an issue that we are going to tackle. But are we going to be able to meet all of the unmet needs? No, we're not. And it doesn't matter how compassionate you and I are, Amanda, that we have fiscal responsibilities. And I know if I did not bring it up, that you being the fiscal conservative that you are, you would say we must be mindful that every dollar that we appropriate and spend in that budget are taxpayers' dollars. We have a responsibility to be good stewards of every dollar that is paid by our citizens, and we have the responsibility to prioritize various services. So that's what we will do, and I think you will continue to see with the leadership of the Republican members of the House and the Republican leaders and the Republican Senate caucus, a fiscally constrained and conservative but responsible budget.
Well, I know that a number of our listeners have asked me point blank, do you think due to the recent change up in the House is going to increase the chances of passing expansion of Medicaid in Virginia? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was listening to one of the sponsors of your show when we did the takeaway, and I heard the one about the Truth Network. And I consider you to be a disciple of truth. You tell it like it is, whether people want to hear it or not. So I'm going to be very candid with you, Amanda. I think that at best, the House of Delegates are going to end up with 51 Republicans and 49 Democrats. There are some Republicans in the House of Delegates who have publicly expressed that they are willing to support Medicaid expansion. So I am fully anticipating that there is a very high probability that the Senate of Virginia is going to see a Medicaid expansion bill coming over from the House of Delegates in some form. I cannot tell you what that form is going to be, but I do have that uneasy feeling that we're going to have to deal with it. And if it comes over to the Senate, as you well know, Amanda, I think that all of the Democrats are going to line up in unequivocal support of Medicaid expansion, no matter what the bill looks like. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on the 21 Republican senators to make sure that we are the adults in the chamber and that, in fact, we are going to look at any bill that comes over very carefully. We're going to scrutinize it to determine whether or not Virginia has the fiscal capability to deal with it. I do think that there will be some issues addressing health care. Three of our senators have been working very quietly about some alternative approaches to Medicaid expansion that would extend benefits, but I would not be surprised to see us having to deal with Medicaid expansion bill in the Senate of Virginia.
Yes, it is. It is. That's very, very, very true. And you know, one thing that I've always said is that, and what we've talked about on the show a number of times, I'll be introducing a bill which I've actually told everybody about, so it's okay to talk about it. The healthcare cost transparency bill, and I know there's no surprise to you that there would be transparency in that bill. That would basically, you know, when you go to get your car fixed or go buy a car or have any other service, you know what it's going to cost, but not necessarily in healthcare. So this bill will attempt to bring some type of transparency when you go to your doctor, that you'll know before you receive those services some idea of what that's going to cost, at least an estimation at that point. So that's one of the ones that I'm working on. I know others that are working on those, and we try to keep that quiet until session starts out of respect for those legislators. But let's talk about, I know one study that you patroned this year that had to do with decriminalization of marijuana. It was a study. Tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about that, Amanda. And I compliment you about your transparency on the cost of health care. We need to continue to work to make government more transparent, and I think that's a good direction. What I have proposed as it relates to marijuana has gotten a little misunderstood, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify it. I have absolutely no interest whatsoever in trying to legalize marijuana. What I am looking at, and what the Crime Commission studied, was the decriminalization of marijuana for first-time offenders. And what it would provide is that if you are a first-time offender of possession of marijuana, not selling it, just simple possession, if you're a first-time offender, that you would have to go through the same steps that you do now. You'd have to go to an education program. You would have to subject yourself to random drug screening. You would have to pay a fine. But at the conclusion of that, if you met all of the terms of your probation, rather than being found guilty rather than you having, an arrest of a criminal conviction on your record, it would be a civil offense for the first time. And the reason that I am proposing that is I deal with lots of college students because I teach both undergraduates and law students at William and Mary. And while I don't condone the possession of smoking of marijuana, it's a fact of life. And I think young people sometimes make mistakes. And I don't think that it ought to be a blight on their record forever. So this would give individuals an opportunity to feel the same sting of punishment for the mistakes that they made, but yet it would just be reflected as a civil charge as opposed to a criminal charge, and they would be able to expunge it or have it erased from their arrest record. So that's where I'm trying to go with it. Not the least bit interested in legalization whatsoever. Anyone stopped for driving under the influence of drugs would be the same laws just as it is now. You would not get off on a drunk driving for being under the influence of drugs.
Very good. Well, listen, I wish that I had 2 hours today so we could. There's so many more things that I want to talk about. I can't even believe that we're almost to the final segment of Cut to the Chase, which is basically 4 minutes. Would you have time to stay through the break and come back after? I've only got like 4 minutes left, but I'd love to keep you on as long as I can.
Sure. That will be fine, Amanda, whatever works for you.
Okay, great. Stay tuned. We'll be back with Majority Leader, Senate of Virginia, Tommy Norment. We'll be right back. Well, we're already at the final segment of Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase today. And, it's been such an honor and a privilege to have the Republican Majority Leader of the Senate of Virginia, Senator Tommy Norment, on today for the full hour. Sometimes I've heard you for like 5 minutes at a time on other, radio shows, but I'm so glad we get you for a full hour. So,
Well, for some people, 5 minutes is more than enough. So you're very complimentary. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to turn the floor over to you and just let you share with folks. We've only got about 3 minutes left, but just any key points that you see, anything that would be of interest of the average citizen that they can expect this session.
Well, first of all, I'd like to lead off one of your sponsors. I just was listening to another ad, and it was talking about the Great People Show. And I hope that your listeners appreciate that you are running the Great Legislator Show. Your efforts at communicating with the citizens that you represent is so important. So I am hopeful that through your efforts and other legislators, that the citizens of Virginia will truly pay attention to what's going on during the 2018 session. With all the efforts from the Transparency Caucus, the citizens have the opportunity for the first time of going on GeneralAssembly.org to listen to live streaming. There's no reason for them not to get the actual version of what is going on as opposed to maybe some media twist. So for what you've done is so very important. Secondly, I would encourage your listeners to reach out to your legislators. We want to hear from you. We are in Richmond to represent you. And if we don't hear from you, it's very challenging for us to get a measure on how you feel about issues. So I'm hopeful that you'll reach out to Amanda Chase as your delegate and any of the other 139 legislators. Last point, as I mentioned, the budget is so important. It goes into every aspect of a citizen's life, whether it's health coverage, kindergarten through 12, public education, higher education, public safety. Everything is affected by that budget, and the citizens really ought to be watching and holding your legislator, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, holding them accountable for the decisions that they make as it relates to that budget. The General Assembly is going to spend an enormous amount of time rewriting, and let me emphasize, rewriting that budget that Governor McAuliffe put on the table. We are not bound by that, and we will be rewriting that. And Amanda, I know in the past that you have really been exceptional at coming forward and offering budget amendments and suggestions that impact the citizens that you represent. And we'll certainly look forward to hearing from you again, and I appreciate your conservative and steadfast input on that. So those are just some.
Well, that wraps up the show. I can't thank you enough for coming on. Next week, we're going to have Chris LaCivita, who is a national consultant, and I know Senator Norment knows him very well. So stay tuned next week.